Welcome to this edition of In-Depth Alaska. I'm Tracy Sinclair. On Sunday, August 25th, a landslide in Ketchikan, Alaska, killed one person and destroyed 4 homes. One of those homes was owned by Bill and James Montiver. Reporter Joe Cadotte sat down with the couple to talk about their experience as the earth shifted beneath them.
So, take me through today. What happened today?
Today, actually, we just got out of the emergency room again because I think one of the meds that they gave me a migraine, and the medicine that I normally take, we literally have nothing. Is at the house, and so it's now under several feet of mud, and they're trying to augment an emergency fly in, get meds to us, so we have our meds. But I don't have it, so I woke up this morning at 2 a.m. with a migraine, and which they get pretty nasty. So I ended up having to go to the emergency room where they shot me full of stuff, and now I'm a little more functioning.
So, walk me through. I know you told me a lot of what you saw and heard, but what? I'll either ask the question, both of you can respond,
Sure.
or I'll ask both of you the question.
Okay.
But that is what were you doing on Sunday?
So I was sitting on the couch, and we laughed over this afterwards. 20 minutes before I had just walked up, because we've sold the house. The house is sold, or was sold. We were supposed to close on Friday, and the new buyers, the new pediatrician here at the hospital, obviously doesn't have anything to buy anymore, so that's gone. And we bought a house in Puerto Rico, and we were moving stuff around and packing it up, and I was just finished packing because they were supposed to come Monday to collect all the boxes for the container. And I was walking upstairs, and I told Bill, I said, you know what? I'm gonna miss this house. I really love it. And 20 minutes later, it was gone. It was, yeah. So I was sitting on the couch, and I heard the rumbling. I heard him scream. I didn't hear what he said. And I thought it sounded like, I said, is that a hurricane? Because it sounds exactly like what hurricanes sound like, or we've been through tornado, yeah. And so I turned to look at him, and as soon as I did, it hit us and threw me out of the couch, because the house actually collapsed in onto itself sideways. So it threw me into the ceiling, where I dislocated my shoulder, and then back down on the floor. And luckily the couch had flipped over like this, so when the floor up above dropped on it, it dropped like this, and I had a space right here of about 18 inches, that clearance. So that sofa saved me, is all I can say. And then I guess I had about 8 seconds of panic, because I knew he wasn't there. So I started screaming for him, trying to find him. And it took me about 25 minutes to extricate myself out because of my shoulder. I couldn't function with my right arm. About halfway through, I heard him.
Well, I wanted to go back. I heard him the entire time, screaming, crying, Bill, where are you? I yelled back, but he couldn't hear me. So
until I got about halfway out, then I heard him. I verified that he was all still in one piece, and tried to verify where he was. By the time I got out, completely out, the pastor from one of the local churches was standing out there offering assistance to me. He handed me off to somebody else, and I told him where Bill was. He said he would stay there until the first responders got there. And I was able to walk out and around, met with the first responders, told them where they were, and they went and chainsaws to cut him out.
And that was Alan McElroy. He is we had never met him before, but apparently his family was also evacuated after the fact, and he came down to help, even though he had left his family behind.
Just a great guy.
So you described it pretty well. What was that like when you realized that you were pinned, and did you know what had happened, or was it a while?
Yeah. Well, I still thought it was a hurricane tornado. I still thought it was, because the way the house collapsed and shook and fell, it just like you see on television. It felt like it had been picked up and dropped somewhere. I had no idea about the mudslide. I didn't even know it until I was at the emergency room, because where I came out and around behind the house that was below us, you couldn't see up the hill. And then I got to the first responders out there, and they had just turned off the power. Thank goodness, because I was in about 2 feet of water, but walking out to the road. But the power was off, and so they came and got me and took me out, waited for the ambulance. And I never turned to look back at the house. I just, once the guys knew that there was somebody where to go, I told them, please get the pets. We have 2 miniature dogs, and Bill's in the kitchen somewhere. So when I left it all in their hands, because I knew I couldn't do anything at that point.
What were you doing? You were on the couch,
Just watching television.
hanging out?
Yeah.
Would that have been on the first floor or the second floor?
Technically the first floor, so we have a basement, first floor, second floor. And it's a walkout basement, so it's 3 full stories.
Got it. So, if I heard you right, you said that it threw you up into the ceiling and then back down.
Yeah.
When it threw you up into the ceiling, were you like on the ceiling looking down?
No, it was bumped, just like that, because it had caved. It was caving in, so it wasn't like 8 feet. It was probably at that point 4 feet, and then when I fell, it was 18 inches.
So when everything kind of settled and you were kind of pinned by the couch with your arm dislocated, did you get this feeling like I'm alive?
No, actually, all I could think about was him. So I didn't think about me at all. I didn't even take the time to be cognizant of my whereabouts. I think if I'd had the fortitude to be able to say, okay, you're okay, where's your phone, where are your glasses, where are the dogs, but it was all about where was he.
How long were you stuck?
Only a minute or two, because where the sofa had, the sofa was here and the ceiling was like this, and I was laying here, so I wasn't pinned. I was able to shimmy out, and as I got out to where the dining room area was, the dining room area was about 3 feet to the ceiling, and then the French doors on the downside of our house was all glass. The glass had all shattered and that had all collapsed. So that's why it came down that way. It looks kind of like an accordion now if you look at it from the backside. I was able, the header over the French doors, we actually remodeled this house. It's a 100-year-old house, and we completely remodeled it. And when I did the headers above the French doors, I was using Anchorage snow load coats, so it was slightly over-engineered, but that's what held the opening. So the opening was there, and I was able to get out that way, and that got me to the edge of the dining room, and I could see part of the countertop from the island, and some of the cabinets was there, and I could hear Bill very clearly at that point, so that's where my focus was.
Are you saying that because you kind of like remodeled this house based on Anchorage like building codes that it could have made it strong enough?
I think it did.
To have protected you?
I think it did a lot of that, because the basement, we replaced the floor joist, the floor beam with steel, and so we could open it up. And the second floor we did when it was an old house, was
James
balloon
did
frame.
was for pure
Yeah.
earthquake
It's a little over,
so to
overkill
speak,
in some
and
areas.
That kind of stuff.
So you actually kind of remodeled the house with the mindfulness of, hey, we want this place to be relatively earthquake proof.
Well, a little bit. I was bringing it up to Alaska Housing Standards, and their standards are not rigorous, but they're pretty good. And I think most of the standards, at least all the ones I had read, were from Anchorage, and so that's what was in my mind. And when I built headers, I tended to overbuild them sometimes because this needs to have a 2x6 and a 2x6 and a 2x6 and a top when it didn't necessarily need to, but that's what I was used to building.
So I have this image in my mind now, relatively clear, of you being saved by this couch and what you went through with that. So then I want to ask you,
Sure.
What were you doing, say, a minute and a half before all this happened?
Let me preface it by I am a cleanaholic by birth, my mom, and we had just packed everything, and I had gone through and cleaned every corner, cabinet, front, back, inside, you name it, for the new owners.
And he was finishing the cleaning
I
of the
was
kitchen.
in the last cabinet under the sink next to the dishwasher when I suddenly heard something that I thought sounded like a jet engine, and it bothered me at first, but then I saw this really bright light outside, and that light kept getting brighter instead of flickering or anything else, which I found out yesterday was actually from our neighbors, the power poles falling past the window of the kitchen. And that's why it kept getting brighter and brighter. And that's when I jumped to the floor thinking the safest place is flat. And then I noticed that I was banging around the floor like this, and I told James I felt like I was being electrocuted because my body was violently thrashing around, and brain just didn't connect. And then apparently I was faced uphill. Apparently I didn't know for sure until earlier today. From the time of the actual landslide to the time that I was pulled out was over an hour and a half long. I thought it was like 45 minutes long. So I apparently
Just goes.
was knocked out for a brief period of time. How long, I don't know. And then it was waiting for first responders to appear. And that's when Pastor McElroy was standing. There was a little window about this big, not a true window, but opening. And I could see up through the mud, about 6 feet up, his shoe. And that's all I could tell is I was now underground and he was above me. I couldn't move. Everything around me was flattened except
The dishwasher had flipped over, the refrigerator had flipped over and hit the dishwasher because the countertop took it and created a wedge where he was under and saved under that.
You were saying, what were you saying?
I have to regain my composure for a second.
So what you said was, you noticed that everything was flattened, and then you started talking about the dishwasher.
Yes, thank you. I noticed that my head was under the dishwasher, but this side of my head was fine. And then when I started kind of checking out everything around me, noticed that my head back here was sore, but didn't think that much about it. Then I tried to see if I could move anything, and everything with my arms, nothing would even pretend to budge. My legs, I had some wiggle room. tried to kick stuff out of the way, couldn't even pretend. I still hadn't figured out what was going on. I mean, it was like a complete surreal, existential type of experience. When I finally realized that I was actually under the house, no longer in it, I also realized that my body had completely turned around. When we first apparently started sliding, I was facing legs going down. When I woke up, my head was under the dishwasher, legs pointed up. So it was a complete spin around.
When you were in that position where you said you could barely move anything but your legs, did you think that you might have been hurt, or maybe hurt more than you were?
I didn't feel any pain at all. I just knew that I heard him screaming and crying, and I tried to yell back that I'm okay, but he didn't hear me. And he finally kept yelling and saying, I'm going to go try and find help. And while I'm waiting, I heard our neighbor, Leah, up on 2nd. She lived next door to us on 2nd. She and her husband, Perry, and she had come out into the yard after it had settled, yelling, "Are you there? Are you there?" And I said yes, but that's when I heard James also say, "Yes, I'm here." And I think you had already connected with the pastor at that point.
Yeah.
But she was the first person I had even heard to know that people know we're here. So that made me feel tremendously better. We didn't know at that point if it was just our house or the entire neighborhood, what was happening.
When you heard him screaming and crying, that must have been really, really tough.
Trying to get him to hear me, and no matter how much I screamed, he still couldn't hear. But
When you were in a position where you could barely move anything but your legs, and you could hear him screaming, did you get some thoughts in your mind like, "I'm alive"?
Mm-hmm.
Or what were those initial thoughts? Like what?
I did, but I didn't realize the relativeness of it. I can't say that word. I just thought, wow, we just slid down a hill. No big deal. It wasn't until I kept processing 1, 2, 3 to the point that I knew the gravity of the situation, that I couldn't get out, and if someone didn't come, I would be stuck there. And that's when I got afraid, thinking that even if they get here, what are the odds of them getting here before the rest of the flooring comes crashing through?
So you say everything was flattened that you could see. When you kind of realized that the dishwasher hadn't killed you but had saved you, and everything else was completely flat, I mean, maybe the word miracle is cliche, but I mean, describe when it finally started hitting you that everything in the kitchen was flat as a pancake, and you're in there alive with the dishwasher.
That was when I'm not a praying person. I grew up Southern Baptist, and that kind of drove me against religion of any kind. I've always been very spiritual, and let's be grateful for what we do have, not dwell on things we don't. When I realized I was alive, I just started saying thank you, and thank you for James, because I knew he was okay. I heard him get out of the house, and then I was fine, just waiting until they came with the chainsaws. And
Okay, so I forgot about that part. So you had to be chainsawed out?
they had to cut through the exterior of the wall that remained, and then through the sheetrock that was above me, the wood floor, because it, being a 130-year-old home, all the floors were cedar, and they had to cut through the cedar and then reached in eventually and pulled me up out between the house and the wall of mud up into the next level.
What was that like going through that process? Being chainsawed out, or what was that like?
That was the scariest part, was hearing the chainsaw and glass breaking and that kind of thing. And I kept asking them, do you guys have a jack? The only thing keeping me alive right now is this dishwasher. And I was afraid with them cutting into things that it might lose whatever it was held onto and fall on me. But they couldn't hear me, and they just kept digging. And cutting, the more they were cutting, the
Insier you got?
just a little.
So when they were cutting and you were sitting there like, I hope they don't accidentally kill me.
I did.
So when you were standing outside or standing up, what was that like?
Well, I'll kind of go through it in phases. When they pulled me up, the guy, big burly, Alaska, a fire person, is there, and he says, grab me like a big, strong bear hug, the biggest, strongest you can. I did. I didn't want to let go. He got me up, and I was just like, I'm not letting go. And he said, well, let me give you to the next two guys, because he was in the mud. I had been down here, and he was handing me up to the other guys that then escorted me through the waterfalls. And all I could remember is not having shoes on and walking around in the mud and being terrified of nails and whatever else had been cast around. And
were you hurt at all?
that's where the miracle part comes in, is that other than my head, I was A-okay. In fact, they discharged me from the hospital as soon as they determined I did not have a concussion.
So did both of you go to the hospital
Yeah.
Yes.
that night?
Yeah.
And how long were you there for?
Well, they discharged me about 9
Yeah.
p.m.
Yeah.
and
Hour and a half. I was there for 2 days, 3 days.
But this is where Alaska comes into play, and without asking us, the doctors, even though they had discharged me, they said, don't get out of bed. They wheeled me up to his room and said, you're welcome to stay with him as long as he's in the hospital. And that's something that we had to fight our entire life with hospitals about even visitation rights, and for them to do it without question. In the South, we weren't even allowed to visit each other in the hospital unless it was post-emergency, because they didn't recognize our relationship. But we have been together for 42 years, and that's a different time. Thank you. Oh, thanks, Bob.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Oh, Eric, good.
Thank you.
So you two haven't been together for 42 years, and a good portion of the time that you've been together, a good stretch of that time had been before marriage. was legal, right? So what you're talking about is you had struggled as a couple anytime you have an ordeal with medical.
Yes.
Of sometimes them not allowing you to see each other after any medical stay and procedure or whatever.
And
so that's a very emotional and powerful
Yes.
thing for you, because in a time of miracle for both of you, it was a big deal for them to let you see him.
Yes, yes, tremendous. But even greater than that, the fact that they knew that we had to be together without
didn't
even
even-
questioning our relationship.
They didn't ask. They just moved him in.
And I have never felt that anywhere other than Alaska and Washington State. I haven't spent a lot of time in other West Coast states, but East Coast states, it was almost impossible to
When
get
we
around
first met,
that.
we couldn't get a single insurance policy on the car. We had to have 2 insurance policies because they did not allow 2 men to have a coexisting insurance policy.
We didn't have a, what's the word, where you both have,
Familiar relationship. Yeah, there was no, because it wasn't family.
So even since you two, what year did you get married legally?
not too long ago, it was the first year it was legal here in Alaska. I know the date, Friday the 13th of April.
Yeah.
So what, it's been what, 4 or 5?
It's been more than that.
Years.
It's Helen's and Alex's. About 6 almost, I think.
I don't think
5,
it's been
6,
that long.
So this would have been one of the, unfortunately or fortunately, one of the few times that you felt like you were treated like his husband in an emergency
Right.
situation.
Yes.
Is that a big deal to you?
It's huge. I finally felt human. To be treated as though you're the root cause of your mother's epilepsy, I was told that by relatives, other pastors, other ministers.
Because
he's gay. Yeah. He was condemned by other family members because, well, you know, your mother wouldn't be sick if you weren't gay.
And even though my mom and dad were both devout Southern Baptists,
They were wonderful
they
people.
accepted me, they accepted James as family from day one, and yet the rest of the world, we did not count.
When we first met and moved in together, I was his landlord and he was my tenant because it was illegal for 2 men to share an apartment.
where was that?
Greenville,
South Carolina. You could not.
Illegal for 2 straight men?
2 straight
Well,
men. 2,
not illegal. That
they just wouldn't rent to
you could
2
be
men.
be roommates,
Yeah.
but you could not be on the
Lease.
lease
Yeah.
jointly. You
Right.
each had to
Had to be
fill it out
individually
separately.
and separately.
Talk about when you were with him and he looked a little bit more banged up than you, right? But when they let you, they brought you to his room and you're both there, you're both alive, you're allowed to be in there, they recognize you as husband to
And
each other.
husband, yep.
Right. What was that like? That moment that you're in there with him and you realize everything's okay, you had just gone through a miracle.
We felt at home again, at peace immediately. They rolled my bed up next to his, and we grabbed hands, and I knew he was okay only because of the expletives coming from his mouth, screaming, trying to get out of the house, and him crying whenever he called my name out. And so when we saw each other, we knew life was good again, and it's when
We've been through a lot of trials and tribulations, and we've been blessed so many times over. We've been fortunate, we've been lucky, good things have happened to us almost our entire life, along with the bad. And we just choose not to focus on the bad because it'll destroy you if you let it. While we have to focus on the good. I mean, we found out 2 days later that the insurance company won't pay anything on the house that we had just sold and just bought in Puerto Rico. And so they're saying, no, it's landslide, and we haven't been covering that for 5 years.
Well, it turns out, apparently on that, I won't talk too long on it, but we found out yesterday afternoon, evening, by someone in town that we know who said the reason they don't cover it anymore is FEMA had been so inundated with policy, what am I trying to say?
It was the law changes.
With all the hurricanes that had been causing havoc in Texas and Florida and Louisiana, that they were going under literally from too many claims.
FEMA.
Yes. And he said that's when they enacted in all of Southeast Alaska, not just here, or with our insurance, all insurance across the board, you cannot get it for earthquake, landslide, or flood. And no one in this town knows that because
no one knew that.
This is the first landslide, other than a tiny little trickle.
In 65 years.
And everyone thinks they're covered. So we have been talking to everybody, and they're just like, oh my God. And they can't get coverage for it.
But they didn't tell us that. So, I mean, we have insurance through Lloyd's of London on a rider that we have on our house. We could have gotten insurance if we had known that insurance wasn't on the house, if that was an issue. But they're covering literally nothing. And we got out, I mean, I don't have my glasses on. No glasses, no phones. I didn't even have shoes on. He didn't have shoes on either. And it was just clothes on our back.
Thanks for listening to this edition of In Depth Alaska. Please like and subscribe to this podcast.